So we're going to talk about deadlifting here, and obviously there's a whole host of implements we can deadlift with. Hopefully it'll make more sense why we're choosing the progressions we are, and we're going to integrate all these tools over time. Now, a lot of people, they'll introduce a deadlift with a kettlebell deadlift. Is that wrong to do? I hate using the word wrong. I always like to think, can we do better? Because the tendency is we give people a light weight, we ask them to get over the weight. Well, because kettlebells change their shape as their weight changes, this is a very long range of motion for me to get down. So obviously we could elevate the implement, we could put it on a step or so forth, but here's the other avenue that I like to look at, the hand position. So even if I don't have a smaller kettlebell, you give me a bigger kettlebell, which is great, I'm going to get down in the position and my hands are going to have to get like here. And I've done thousands and thousands of kettlebell deadlifts over the years with clients. It's here, create that tension, and stand up. Now, that's a nice exercise, but it can be difficult to teach because the hand position places it where it's hard for me to engage the lats and the core. So again, a lot of people do the kettlebell deadlift, they think it's actually going to be easier. It's actually pretty challenging for a lot of people because of the position the hands place the shoulders upon. One of the reasons we made the ultimate sandbag the way we did was so that we could take advantage of that in a more neutral grip and get people's hands a little wider. When the hands get a little bit wider, then we can go ahead and create more tension, we create more stability, and get in a better position for the deadlift. The deadlift is all about having a moving plank from my hips up. So again, this part is plank, hips up, while my lower body is moving. Basically, we want to look at the fact that if I connect those lats to my core again, that helps me maintain that position. Now you may ask, well, why not use something like a barbell? Again, it wouldn't be inherently wrong, but the barbell, our palms are down, it's harder to create that tension upon the lat, and you're going to see that become limited as far as the range of motion or the different patterns we can hit than we can with some of these other tools. Where I really like kettlebells for some of the deadlift progression we're going through, we're just not going to start there because of the positioning we get to have with the ultimate sandbag. So what we want to do is make sure the ultimate sandbag starts against my body. So zipper side facing away from me, and I'm going to actually pull the handles in towards my body. Handle position plays such a big part in what we do because it can change the impact of the exercise. So when I get in that position, I grab the ground with my feet. That allows me to come in that hip hinge pattern first. Then I just have to simply pull the weight in towards my body and pull the handles out. And when you see me do so, you should have seen my shoulders lock into place. Those lats become active. That becomes my foundation for the movement. So again, if I lock in the upper body, this should make the lower body much easier to produce the action. Let's talk about the positioning of the lower body though. We're going to go in more conventional style, or I'll even go venture into an athletic style. Whatever position I'd be in to get ready to jump up as high as I could. While a lot of people ask me, Josh, why don't we do sumo deadlifts and so forth? Think about the context of these exercises. So sumo deadlifts come from the world of powerlifting where the goal is to lift as much weight as possible. So it makes sense if I go wider, I shorten the distance that the weight has to cover, and I'm also increasing my level of stability. I should be able to lift more weight. Now some people will point to, well, we get different EMG readings in the lower body. In doing so, that's true, but we also have to look at the con side, which is there's actually research to show that being in a sumo position does put more negative stress upon my hip joints as well. So we're going to be in this nice position here to perform most of our exercises. So as we start teaching the hip hinge, this can be one of the more challenging patterns that people get because we all know that our clients want to squat the hinge. But we have to understand why that occurs and how we can start building foundations and using fundamental principles to help solve those problems. So just like in the squat module where we talk about a bad squat is a flexion response, it's a startle response to not feeling stable, squatting is a very similar response when we don't feel comfortable hinging, meaning that it's natural for my eyes want to remain level with the horizon. That's a survival mechanism, right? From a survival and evolutionary standpoint, it doesn't make sense that I want to take my eyes away from the horizon because I lose what happens in front of me. So when people don't feel balanced, they're going to try to remain more upright. So one of the big reasons that people don't feel balanced is because of the cueing that we give them. And we obviously give these cues with good intentions, but one of the problems with some of them is that people are very literal with these cues. For example, we often tell people to push their hips back. If you tell someone to push their hips back, if I tell Jessica, just think about pushing your hips back, where do you feel your body? See her toes come off the ground. So you guys should already know by what we've talked about in the manual, when the feet are soft on the ground or released from the ground, you lose stability up in the chain. So during a hip hinge, will her Hips go back. Yes, but they're not the things that lead the movement. So again, going back to good principles of our lift system, where does everything start from? You guessed it, the ground. So I had Jessica here barefoot for a couple of reasons. One is that, again, people's shoe wear can interfere with how they engage with the ground and their position alignment. So again, if you're struggling getting people to be aware, the simplest thing you can do is get them barefoot or in minimalist shoes. Now, being also barefoot gives me an opportunity to put the band around her feet, just like we've done in the pressing section and the squatting section, to get the feet engaged, because everything comes from the ground up. So now, if she keeps that tension in the band and she keeps her feet grounded, now she pushes her feet back, keeping the feet back, you feel a lot more stable, don't you? Okay, she feels more balanced, she feels more stable. Her body will allow her to go more into that hip hinge. She'll actually get more range of motion than she would if she were to just focus on pushing her hips back. And that's a problem with what Q will see in a moment, where people put the band around their waist, is that if you don't cue the feet first, people feel like they're falling. And whenever I feel like I'm falling, I'm going to go into that startle reflex. So something else, once we have the stance now, and you also notice this puts Jessica in a pretty good stance, about hip width apart. Now people will inevitably ask me, Josh, what about sumo and all these other things? Listen, we're talking about functionally based training. So when we say functional, remember, positions and alignments were designed to do innately. Meaning, if I was going to jump up as high as I can, you're not going to jump from here. You're going to jump from something about here. Now, you have to understand the context of things like sumo. We talked about this in the manual. In powerlifting, the goal of the sport is to lift as much weight as humanly possible. So by going sumo, I shorten the distance the weight has to move, and I create a more stable base, so I would be able to lift more load. So for the sport of powerlifting, that's great. And for those of you that tell me, well, Josh, I get all this different, glute activation, this activation, listen, we'll get plenty of muscle activation, but you also have to say, whenever we get in a joint position like this, we put a lot of stress in that SI joint in those hips. So again, we want to be safe and effective at the same time. So again, we don't want our feet underneath, but if we get band tension, it places Jessica almost in what I would call an athletic position. So once we're there, if Jessica puts her hands in the crease of her pelvis, one thing we can do is have her hold her shoulders back, and as she grabs the ground, she's going to have soft knees, she's going to push her hands into her pelvic bone, start to understand what it feels like. So I want to key her to keep grabbing the ground, and that's what gives her that nice flat back, right? That's what transitions her hips back. So she starts to get a little feedback, and by holding the shoulders back, we start to engage those lats. So this is great if you use this as a warm-up drill, a prep drill before you do a lot of the hip hinging, just to remind people where they're at. That band tension is going to be really helpful, because remember, it's going to make them grab the ground. So in a moment, we're going to start putting together a little bit of a load with it, so they get a little bit more feedback and start building that progression. So I truly believe there's probably no better tool to teach a deadlift with than the ultimate sandbag. I've had a lot of coaches come to me and say, Josh, I find this easier than using a kettlebell, a barbell. Is that okay? Obviously, if it allows you to teach a concept to your clients better, then yes, of course it's okay. You don't need me to tell you that. What makes it better, I think we've gone over this, is the hand position, the feedback that we get, the distance that it allows you to travel, and again, the ability to easily use simple cues to understand what we want from the movement pattern of the hip hinge. Because remember, a deadlift is a hip hinge. A hip hinge doesn't have to be a deadlift. We start with the deadlift because it's a very slow, stable, and simple exercise as far as what's happening in the body. Meaning, we're largely moving dominantly through the sagittal plane only. We're having a very stable base, the waist moving in line with our body. So a great way to introduce the concept. Now, a couple things that we want to make sure of is that Jessica starts with the weight actually upon her feet and all the way against her shins. If you can see your feet, then the weight is too far away and you're going to start reaching with the body. She's going to take that same stance. I had her take the band off right now, but that nice hip width or athletic stance. Again, watch for especially people that don't feel like they have a lot of mobility, that they'll want to get wider. I'd rather you raise the height of the implement than allow people to change their stance. Because you're going to find as they groove the movement, their range of motion and mobility improves rather rapidly. Now, we want her to grab the ground with her feet, and what we want her to do is think about sliding her pelvis back in so she grabs onto the neutral grip handles. And you notice when I tell her to break the handles apart and pull the handles into her, how she gets so much tension in her upper back and she has that nice flat back. And rise for a second, Jess. So again, it's breaking the handles apart, but also pulling the handles in towards you. So can you try to show the handles dumping forward, Jessica? So Jessica can try to pull the handles apart from here and create some tension, but you see the weight is going to pull her forward. So having the hands over the middle, pulling the weight in towards her body and pulling apart is going to set her foundation so much stronger. Now the other thing against people with the hip hinge is they think there's no knee bend. Now listen, you want to aim for a relatively vertical shin with a hip hinge. That doesn't mean the knees can't bend. In fact, they need to bend, because what you have is that connection with your IT band from your glutes to your knees. So if you fully want to engage the glutes, you've got to bend their knees. What you want to avoid is being upright and having the knees go forward. But if I have Jessica grab with her feet and grab the handles, I want her to try to pull herself back, keep dropping herself down, keep dropping herself down, and keep pulling apart, and see now the angles she has. And relax, Jessica. Her knees are definitely bent. If we were to ask her to jump up as high as she can, she's basically in that same position. So a lot of people, especially women that tend to have better mobility than us guys, they'll be too straight-legged. So I should see the shoulders significantly higher than the hips. Okay? A lot of people will either get the shoulders in line with the hips or have the hips a little higher than the shoulders, and that's definitely a problem. Okay? So we want shoulders slightly higher than the hips. So when we get in that position again, Jessica, tension first. So this is when the exercise starts. She's tense, and I can just give her a little feedback, and she's tense. Okay, we have plank. So the cue is to push through her feet and get as tall as she can. Okay, so again, she's tall, tall, tall. If anything, I want to cue her through the top of her head. Keep telling her, keep pushing through her feet, keep ripping those handles apart. So she still is engaged with a lot of attention. To come down is push through the feet, pull the handles apart to come back down. Very nice, relax for a moment. So in a moment, I'm going to show you what it looks like where people go wrong. You'll be surprised. The upward part actually tends to go pretty well. It's the downward part that gets people, because they think the exercise is finished at the top. So a couple things at the top position. One, notice I didn't tell her push hips forward, push hips forward, push hips forward, push hips forward. That's when people start getting into the lumbar spine. All right, it gets tall, so it's push the feet, gets push the feet, gets push the feet. I always tell people, think of those marionette puppets where you're being drawn up by a string. You want to be nice and tall and be pushing down, and notice you're still creating a lot of tension with those handles. That's still creating her brace. The coming down part, where people who tend to lead with their shoulders and they bend their elbows, is because they lose tension in the hands and feet. So the same principles that allow me to come up have to be engaged when I come down. Meaning, if you heard me taller, is grabbing on the feet, keep those handles pulled apart as I come down. Then it's almost impossible for me to round my shoulders, and I don't want to bend my elbows. So I'm going to have her do it incorrectly twice, then we'll have her do it correctly twice. So she'll create that tension first when she's up, then she'll lose the tension on the way down. So let's go ahead and create that tension first, Jess. Let's get nice and tall. Now lose the tension in the handles and the feet, and you immediately see how the weight's starting to jerk her down, right? Let's do it one more time, Jess. Pull apart. Now release the tension in the handles. And again, as soon as she loses tension in that shoulder, or that lat, and the core complex, that's where we get the rounded thoracic spine that leads into pressure in that lumbar spine. So let's do it twice, just go where we come up strong and we come down keeping that tension. So weight really against you, drop the hips a little bit more, really pull yourself down. There you go. Get really tall. There you go. And see how when she keeps the tension, everything moves as one unit. And that's really important. So it should look like everything is just on a fulcrum from the hips, that everything is aligned, because we do have that plank still going on. So 9 times out of 10, it's having to go back to feet and handles that causes a lot of compensations that you see with your clients. It's a simple concepts that aren't easy to get people to do. That's why we're constantly using feedback tools to help them understand these ideas. So one of the things we can now use the kettlebells for are sprinter stance variations. So I'm pretty harsh on the trap bar because of the issues I've raised with not having the ability to create the same tension in the body, people turning that into largely squats, having lack of versatility in the equipment, many other reasons. So what we can do is have a lot of the benefits that the trap bar can provide me, keeping the weight closer to my axis of rotation, meaning toward my hips. But being in a sprinter stance gives me better freedom, and I can keep my arms a little closer, create better tension in my body. Now you may wonder why use it for the sprinter stance, not for a bilateral deadlift. Well, a couple of things come to mind. One is that people tend to run the kettlebells into their thighs or their shins with the bells. So again, it's just one of those things, especially as the kettlebells get bigger, it becomes more of an issue. It becomes a logistical issue. People tend to have, if you go competition kettlebells, you'll definitely notice that they tend to try to avoid or bring the kettlebells away from their body to avoid their thighs. So the sprinter stance, because I'm in a different position, generally allows me to do this without the logistical issues that we typically find in the bilateral position. Now what you've seen is I'm going to start the bells in a elevated position. I'm doing so not because Jessica doesn't have the mobility, not because she couldn't go heavier, but I want to emulate what you're going to run into with your clients. So again, probably a lot of your clients are not going to start with massive weights, and probably a good amount of them are going to have some level of mobility issues. So by elevating the implement, we're going to solve a lot of these problems. Now we're starting off with 2 weights of the same sizes. So one of the things you're going to see is because by splitting the feet and make this a multi-pointer exercise, we're going to challenge not only load, but we're going to challenge the distribution of load in just a moment. But let's just go over the finer points of what we're looking for. Alignment is key. So Jessica wants to set herself up in between the 2 kettlebells. So again, she almost wants the back foot to be in the middle. So she's going to line up right about there. So again, see how she has to come down in the position. If she were to scoot back a little bit, Jessica, and line up where the front foot is the lead foot, she's going to end up reaching for the weight a little bit. So we want to almost think about just past the lead leg. All right, so now when she comes down in that hinge position, again, both feet are driving into the ground, she's going to come down, create that tension first in the handles, now push through both feet and get tall. Okay, keeping that tension in the handles, push the feet, hinge down. We also now gave her a definitive endpoint too. She knows where the weights have to go. If she changes her position of her hip hinge, if she gets more squatty, she'll miss the blocks. Let's just do maybe 2 more, Jess. She creates that nice tension, good alignment, good position, nice fluid. Now I can still come around, watch her. Does she have any lateral shift? Does she have any rotation in the movement? She looks really good, and relax. So again, this is a great drill you can use. It starts to build up some of that unilateral strength. It's far more, I hate the word functional because you guys should know that functional means the capacity of the body and how the body functions, rather than we're trying to replicate things like life. But if you want to think in those terms, more real life strength. Because how many times do you see people come down and pick something up rather casually, or they're in a different position or alignment when they go to pick something up? Rarely do people go, hey, hold on, I got to set myself up to pick you up. Like that, they are far more fluid in nature and tend to be in different environments. So again, one of the things we can do is start building that out through these progressions. In a moment, we're going to challenge her lateral flexion and rotation along with load by changing the weight distribution of the kettlebell. So one of the things we use a lot, and we use this in our squat module too, are offset kettlebells. So one of the great benefits of the kettlebells is that I can change how much weight I'm using on either side. So you know, a lot of people, when they go to single leg deadlifts, they use the weight just on one side of their body. We're working that contralateral ingrained pattern, meaning that, like, obviously walking and running are working opposites all the time. It's also getting to amplify some of these different qualities of strength. We talk about strength being not only what you produce, but what you can resist, right? So again, for a lot of people, they can bilaterally lift a ton. You put them in some of these other environments and you see all these rotations and the compensations come about. So the smaller the difference in the weight, the less dramatic the influence of rotation and lateral flexion are. I would suggest that you start with a very small difference in weight. How big is small? 4 kilograms is good. That's about 8 pounds, a little bit more. So again, this is a good starting point. So I have a 20 and a 16 going on right now. In general, I'll have the heavier weight on the trail side leg. That's because that helps counterbalance me, gives me a little bit of that ability to resist that rotation, that lateral flexion. The more dramatic the difference becomes, if this becomes, like I say, a 28 kilogram and this shrinks down to an 8 kilogram, there's more need in me to resist rotation. This also brings about the idea, especially as we get to single leg deadlifts, that using 2 implements is always easier than using 1 because of the counter tension I can create. So I'm going to set up a little wider for my base here. I have wider hips than Jessica does. I'm still working from the blocks just to give you guys the idea that elevating the range of motion is not a bad thing. Again, making sure that people are competent and they're achieving good alignment is most important. I still want to make sure that I line up with the weights a little bit past my front leg. I come down that hip hinge, I create that tension, and I get nice and tall. So again, I want that tension in the handles. Now I notice I lose tension in the handles. What happens to my shoulders? They roll. So tension in the handles, tension in the feet, hip hinge, back down. I still keep that pretty vertical shin. Being as high I am, you can understand why also elevating the implements are good for me unless I'm using very heavy kettlebells. So again, looking at all those little things. Am I rotating? Am I shifting? Coming down, tension first. This is when the exercise starts. I'm still using both feet. Coming down, I should look like I move as one unit, and I still am going to have bend in those knees. Remember, you're still going to have good bend as long as the knee doesn't travel forward. So once I have that, I have a couple options. I keep having that difference between the offset kettlebells, meaning a bigger weight one side, a smaller weight on the other side, or I can start adding some motion. So remember, we're talking about gait and locomotion. I'm going to add a little step here. So as I come forward, it's very natural for me to want to pull this leg forward into more of a gait pattern. So you're going to find, this almost just feels good, if I can't find a better word for it, that keeping your body normally very rigid isn't what our body's designed to do, and just by simply allowing our body to flow forward and do what's natural, it tends to feel very good to the body. What you'll find is that generally as I come up, the leg will come forward, and it'll almost come slightly forward the other way because my brain is going gait pattern, right? Remember we talked about this being a part of the gait cycle. So again, don't be surprised if when you step forward, it doesn't have to be completely in line and you're like this. No, you're gonna be a little forward, it's gonna come in, and you let that foot come, and you're probably gonna come slightly forward to the other side. Don't get overly consumed with these things that are not that important. I'm just bringing awareness to it that these are things that you'll probably see as your clients perform the exercise. Be segmental at first, and then you'll gain fluidity over time. I'll show you. So at first, we want to be very rigid. So set up, we're going to set, step. Now reset my foot back, get my balance, come back down to movement. Again, set. Over time, it becomes a little bit more fluid. Now, with the fluidity brings slightly more instability, meaning that I have to react more to my environment. If people go too fast too early, you'll see that lateral flexion, you'll see those differences in those movement patterns, you'll see them lose tension. Moving with fluidity means I have to be very efficient and remind myself how to put all the pieces of the puzzle together.